Wow, thank you. The guy routinely tells his followers to cut off their friends and family who drive after with him, to the point where he's been credibly accused of being a cult leader. I think those accusations are probably somewhat overstated, aren't they? And this, I think, is something that happened a long time ago, and I think that it would be fair if we were to ask him his positions on these things now.
I don't have people in my life who are willing to advocate the use of force against me in the realm of taxation or regulation. And that has given me great passion and conviction. Everybody says, well, I've learned all these arguments. I want to go out and change people. But they're not living those arguments. And they're not saying to their friends, look, I'll explain it to you 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, but if at the end of it you understand and still advocate the use of force against me, you're not my friend. And I'm not going to spend time with you. And I'm going to view you as a mortal enemy because you are advocating the use of force against me.
You mentioned how once you were into the podcast, you eventually changed the conversation from a abstract political one to a more personal one. Do you feel that's a fair comment, or have I misread that?
I did have some idea of where it is I wanted to take the conversation.
Sure.
At which it had to go. I mean, I think that your observation is very astute, and I would say that it's a lot easier to get people's agreement on abstract philosophical principles than it is on personal relationships, particularly core ones or foundational ones like family relationships. So I needed to start talking about gods and governments, because if I'd started off about family, then I wouldn't have gotten anywhere with anyone, right? But the hook, I guess there's a hook, right? And the bait on the hook is, hey, let's talk philosophy, let's talk the state, let's talk about God, and so on, and let's talk about abstract power structures, and let's work out a philosophical approach that is logical and consistent with those abstract power structures. And people love to come along with that because it's interesting, it's thrilling, it's exciting, it gives you great debating points, it wakens up your brain and so on. And I needed to get people's confidence or trust that I had something useful to offer, something of consistency and rigor to offer in those areas, to get them swept up, to get them excited, to stimulate their minds and so on. I needed to do all of that and to get people swept up in the thrill of abstract philosophy. And then, when they're on board and we're out of sight of land, and then I can say where we're really going, which is we're not sailing into an abstract world of futuristic societies with DROs and private defense agencies and so on. What we're sailing towards is your family and your life and your friends. We're not sailing into an abstract future that you can only guess at and talk about and theorize. And the real question here is not whether there will be vending machines with cocaine in a free society in 200 years. The real question is, if these are your values, what are you going to do about your relationship where you really have control and power? If we're going to ask people to give up the state, but we won't give up our friends, if we're going to ask people to give up their subsidies, like the farmers or the military, if we're going to ask people to give up their subsidies, but we hang around corrupt parents because they're paying for our university, that's just hypocrisy.
The political is the personal. This is what you need to understand. It is a life or death struggle. You understand this. It's personal. And it needs to be personal for you. I'll tell you this, if I was in France and I had a friend who was pro-Macron, he thought Emmanuel Macron was a wonderful guy to be in power, and I was a Le Pen supporter, and he supported a guy who said I was evil and hateful and the true enemy of France, I would tell that person straight up, if you support this man who thinks that I am evil and an enemy, then you must think I am evil and an enemy. And if you think I'm evil and an enemy, I will not be your friend. I will not flagellate myself to gain your approval. I don't care how much history there is between us. I don't care how much in common we have. If you support a man who thinks I am evil, who thinks I am hateful, who thinks I am the true enemy, we cannot be friends. You have become my enemy by supporting a man who thinks this of me. Make it personal. Make it personal.
Wow, thank you. The guy routinely tells his followers to cut off their friends and family who drive after with him, to the point where he's been credibly accused of being a cult leader. I think those accusations are probably somewhat overstated, aren't they?
Because men want nothing but sex. And if you don't give them that, they consider you to be a waste of their time, even though they will most likely abandon you sooner or later, even if you let them screw you.
What was going on in your life when you were 6?
When I was 8, my parents had a very violent divorce, and it seems to have wiped out, or something has wiped out, almost all of my childhood memories. And he used to attack me for he never physically attacked me, okay, but verbally, for not conveying messages he'd give me to give to my mother. And he used to accuse me of trying to play them against each other.
Do you know what attracted them to each other in the first place?
My dad and my mom?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. I asked them both the same question, not even that long ago, and they ironically both gave exactly the same answer.
Physical attraction?
No. Because and this is typical of my family specifically. Your mom was the smartest in her class. This was about intellect. And my mom said your father was the smartest man she knew they both gave exactly the same answer.
So it's sort of an intellectual vanity thing. They were turned on by each other's big brains, right? Some guys are big tits, some guys are big asses. Your parents were just big brain people. It's the same fetish. So they were together for big brains. They weren't together for virtue or maturity or wisdom or anything like that. Okay, so you said that the divorce was violent. Now, do you mean just emotionally, or you also talking with the more incidents of physical violence?
Well, physical... I don't think there was physical violence, but my dad has such a fierce temper. And when he shouts, it's like, if you can, it's like a violence in a sense.
It's it's sort of like a verbal tsunami that just erases towns and villages, right? I know the type. I really know the type. They escalate until you are emotionally destroyed before them, and then there's reconciliation when you cease to exist.
And he only gets furious when he's dealing with, I don't know, family maybe? I'm not sure.
No, I can tell you exactly what it is.
Okay.
You can't say he only gets furious when his will is thwarted, because if he's driving along too fast and he gets pulled over speeding, his will is thwarted. You can't say he just gets angry when he's contradicted, because if he says to the policeman, I don't think I was speeding, and the policeman says, I have you clocked at whatever. And so the key to unlocking the mystery of your father's rage is that he's fine screaming at children. He's fine punching a woman. But he's not out there doing it to cops and politicians and priests. And, you know, if your teacher said something insulting during a student-teacher conference, he wouldn't be punching her in the face, because, you see, she could actually have him drawn up on charges. Could be hugely negative consequences. So your father has this 6 spider sense antennae that's out there that says, can I get away with being a bully? Can I get away? Is it a child of mine? Is it someone who's dependent on me? Can I get away with it? In which case, I'm going to. Now, if I can't get away with it, then I'm going to be sweet as sugar and syrupy as honey, and everything's going to go just fine. So that's the great mystery. Your father doesn't have a bad temper. See, a bad temper is something that erupts regardless of consequences, like Tourette syndrome or like an epileptic attack. It just happens regardless of consequences. That's having a bad temper. If you have the perfect ability to control your temper, if you're, say, pulled over by a policeman, or you're confronted by a teacher or a priest or a politician or somebody who has authority over you, is saying something that bothers you or harms your interests or interferes with your will or whatever it is, if you're perfectly able to control your temper when the consequences of being angry are negative, then you don't have a temper. If you only ever explode and unload your viciousness on children and your wife and all these other people who are, to some degree or another, dependent upon you, or you have control over them, you're just a bully. You don't have a bad temper. You're just a bully.
He was a professor of psychology.
There we go. There we go. So he had tenure. And he wasn't working in the free market, and he had a big government-protected contract.
He didn't, I don't think he had tenure. He didn't stay long enough to get tenure, and he left. He did have a lot of problems in his department with people.
So
but,
a professor of psychology.
Yeah.
So he cannot conceivably claim a lack of knowledge about the destructive effects of verbal abuse.
No, and I think he actually used his knowledge of psychology against us.
Wouldn't be the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you study psychology in a sadistic fashion so you understand better the weaknesses of those you wish to dominate.
Right. Yeah.
Did he mellow with age?
Yes, he's mellowed now.
Has he taken any ownership or responsibility for being a violent abuser?
At one point when I think I was in my 20s or early 30s, there was one incident I addressed with him, and he apologized. He gave like a general apologize for things he may not even remember, or
one
like
of these.
that.
If I made mistakes, I'm sorry.
Well, in that particular context, it was in relation to a particularly traumatizing reaction he had to something I had no control over.
And what was that?
I'd rather not discuss it in public. It was related to...
a period thing. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's fine. Your mother, has she apologized for who she chose to be your dad, or?
No, and that wasn't even the worst thing about her. That wasn't even the biggest issue that she married him. It was that she was a feminist, and I felt like she hated me because I was a girl, and I was a stupid girl, and I was a feminine girl.
And there is a coldness and a brusqueness and a hostility in feminism as I experienced it growing up as well.
Yeah, well...
A lack of patience for anything soft and gentle. Yeah, no, there's a great way to destroy a culture is to make women afraid to depend upon men, because it kills the birth rate. Because when a woman has kids, she is dependent upon a man, or she's dependent upon the state. And so a way to destroy a people is to have the women be terrified to depend upon a man by painting men as ogres, and by instilling a relentless desire for atomistic individualism on the part of the woman, so that she can't merge with a child, she can't merge with a husband, she can't bond, it just completely destroys everything anymore. And yeah, this great tragedy of saying to women, I can remember that there was an Aretha Franklin, Annie Lennox song, sisters are doing it for themselves, it was like, thank you, I'll do it myself. It's like, no you won't. No you won't, you vain, narcissistic, singing douchebags. You're not out there hanging the lights on your concert stage yourself. You're not out there driving trucks, hauling the heavy gear up that because you've got toothpicks for arms. Okay, well, not Aretha Franklin. She had, I don't know, bags filled with Jell-O for arms. But no, you're not doing it for yourselves. Are you the recording? You're hiring a lot of women to be your recording engineers? Don't think so. You're hiring a lot of women to hang your lights? No, I don't think so. And I'm not sure, given how you've talked about your parents now, I'm not sure that you made it as far away as you needed to in order to carve your own space.
No.
You're still in the orbit, right?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you mean like...
You still have a relationship with your parents?
Yeah.
Why?
After a certain amount of time, I reestablished contact, just email contact with my father, and everything. I feel like
Was that under the advice of a therapist, or something that you read, or something you wanted to do on your own?
It was my own, me.
Why? And what was the thinking behind that?
I felt like I could, I felt like I had changed enough to be able to manage
No, but what was
the
the plus?
plus.
You know, like, so if you fell into a bear cage, right, and then you go work out a lot, and you're like, okay, now I can go back into that bear cage and I'm tougher. It's like, well, why'd you want to go back into the bear cage at all? As a good father, I resent your subsidization of bad fathering.
Subsidization
Yeah.
of bad.
Yes.
Okay.
My daughter will want to spend time with me when I'm old because she loves me,
No.
right? But you're like, well, I'm going to spend time with my father anyway. It's like you're subsidizing. You're treating him as if he was a good father when he wasn't a good father. As a good father, that resents me. I resent that.
Okay. I've never encountered someone who shares my values.
But you don't share your values because you reward people who do the opposite of your values. See, you have to have integrity if you want to have love. So you can see your parents, in my view, I think it's going to cost you love. Because you say, well, I want to really love someone who shares my values. Okay, do your parents share your values? No. Your father's a violent bully and your mother's a cold-eyed feminist who has worked as hard as she can to shroud you in the contempt of others and undermine and whatever, right? So they do the opposite of your values, but you're still hanging out with them. So
Okay,
I don't know how you're
so-
going to end up and say, well, I want someone who shares my values. It's like, well, no, you're giving up time, energy, and resources to people who are the exact opposite. Not only are they the exact opposite of your values, but also they have inflicted those horrible values upon you to your great harm. So if you want to have someone who has integrity, don't you have to live with integrity first?
So you're saying if I stop having a relationship with my parents, then I can find someone who shares my values.
Well, I'll tell you this, as a man who's dealt with all of this kind of stuff, if I came across you in the dating pool and I heard about your parents and then I found out you were still hanging out with them, I'd be like, so she doesn't really believe her values. Because she's willing to reward people who have abused her for years. Like, how is that having integrity at all?
Well, I don't hang out with them.
Yeah, don't start
Exactly.
quibbling. Don't start quibbling. That's not the time. It's not the time to start quibbling with me. But given that I do want you to experience love and connection, I'm just telling you that a virtuous man would look at this and say that you have virtues and values, but you're living the opposite of them in your relationship with your parents.
But if you met someone like me and I had no relationship with my parents, wouldn't you be equally skeptical?
God, now I incredibly admire you. That's where I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave things at the moment, and I do apologize for the ying. That ended a tiny bit abruptly, and I just wanted to put a slight addendum in. There has been a smidge of confusion about this whole confronting your parents stuff. So I want to explain it. People will still misunderstand it if they want to, but at least I want to be on the record for explaining sort of what I mean. And the cost of that is to elevate evil and bullying and anti-reality to the highest pinnacle of your value system. And if you don't think that costs you love and integrity and self-respect and honesty and virtue, well, you're fooling yourself. I believe for your mental health, for your virtue, for your integrity and your capacity to love, and for your self-respect, if as a free agent, as an adult, as a person with independence and sovereignty and free will, if you voluntarily subsidize the rancid delusions of evildoers, you cannot do that and maintain self-respect. You can't do it. People are cowardly and appease evildoers and pretend it's some sort of virtue. Oh, I've forgiven them. Oh, I've forgotten. Oh, I've moved on. Oh, I've put the past in the past. Oh, I'm bigger. I'm taking the high road. They make a virtue out of falsifying reality in order to appease evildoers. They make a virtue out of it. Now, that's the problem.
Wow, thank you. The guy routinely tells his followers to cut off their friends and family who drive after with him, to the point where he's been credibly accused of being a cult leader. I think those accusations are probably somewhat overstated, aren't they?
Society is revealed as a twisted hellscape of child torture and the enablers of child torture.
She is my mother. She should be held to a higher standard. She should be more responsible than just some stranger.
Can I tell you what I said to someone who gave me that she's your mother argument?
Please do.
Someone said to me, Steph, but she's your mother. And I said, yes, she is. And that's why she's not fucking dead now. The bond was strong enough that I didn't fucking kill her. And that's my forgiveness. But the idea that I'm going to go and cut her birthday cake, that's insane.
I have to see her. I'm going to my grandmother's in a few months, and I have to see her, and it's terrifying the hell out of me.